Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing an Ogdoadic deck profile. So I'm really excited for this deck, because this is the one that I was the most excited for out of all the decks that were in Ancient Guardians. This is the deck that I've been wanting to build the most. I love the aspect of it. It's ancient Egyptian dark snakes, which I think is amazing. I love that they're made of darkness, and it's just amazing the way the deck looks. The gold and the black coloring of all the card artworks just works really well, and it has super amazing synergy with Lair of Darkness. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon in the description below for all those awesome rewards like getting your name in the description of every single video, getting a signed card sent in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing a single copy of the Ogdoadic Overlord. So the Ogdoadic Overlord is the big boss monster of the deck. This deck plays a lot of boss monsters, but this one is by far the biggest and the craziest, because if this card is in your graveyard, because this deck totally plays kind of like Infernoids a little bit, but basically what it does is if this card's in the graveyard, you contribute 3 monsters to special summon this card once while this card is face up on the field. Quick effect, you can send all monsters on the field to the graveyard except face up monsters special summoned from the graveyard. You can only use the effect of this card once per turn. It's a 3100 beat stick. This card is a walking OTK. They can just totally take out your opponent's plays, and it's just an absolutely amazing boss monsters. We're then playing a single copy of the Ogdoadic King. You just need a single copy of the King. The King is really good because it has the ability, this card's in the graveyard, you contribute 2 monsters to special summon this card, and if your opponent adds a cards from their deck to their hand, except during their draw phase or their damage step, then you can send a random card from their hand to the graveyard. So it's kind of like a little bit like Dark Law, but it's a really amazing card as well. And if a monster your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard, then you can add a light or a dark reptile from your deck or graveyard to your hand, which is a really, really good effect. We're then playing a single copy of the Ogdoadic Queen. The Ogdoadic Queen is also a really good card. You contribute 2 monsters, special summon this card from the graveyard. And if this card is, if a monster is normal or special summoned from your opponent's graveyard, then you can send a monster they control to the graveyard, that they control to the graveyard. And if a monster is sent to the graveyard from your opponent's hand or deck to the graveyard, then you can special summon a light or a dark reptile from your graveyard except another copy of itself, which is a really good effect just to be able to get you additional monsters. We then play a single copy of the Ogdoadic Dark. Ogdoadic Dark is really good because if this card's in the graveyard, you can treat a monster, special summon this card, and then your opponent can add 1 monster from their graveyard to their hand. And if this card is special summoned, then you get to target 2 of your banished monsters, including a reptile, and return them to the graveyard, which stacks your graveyard even more to get you additional plays. Play a single copy of the Ogdoadic Light. You tribute 1 monster to special summon this card from the graveyard, and it also has the ability that then your opponent can special summon a monster from their graveyard and negate its effects. And if this card is special summoned, you can target a level 4 loader Ogdoadic monster in the graveyard and special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field, which helps you get into a lot of different plays in this deck. We then play a single copy of the Ogdoadic Boundless. Boundless is alright as a 1-of. I probably would not play this card any more than 1. A lot of this deck is 1-ofs because it's so searchable and has so much utility. But if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard or special summoned from the graveyard, then you can activate the effect that your opponent draws a card, and if they do, you add an Ogdoadic monster from your deck to your hand. It also has the ability that then each player sends a card from their hand to the graveyard, and if this card is in your graveyard, you can send a card from your hand to the graveyard and add this card from your grave to your hand. That's why I play this card as a 1-of, because it's a really interesting, unique card that can help you get more Ogdoadic monsters into the grave. We then play 3 copies of the Ogdoadic Remnant. Ogdoadic Remnant is so good because when this card, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to send 1 light reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. And if this card is normal or special summon, then you can add 1 Ogdoadic spell or trap from your deck to your hand as well, which is really good because you can add stuff like your water lilies from your deck to your hand. I then play 3 copies of Nunu, the Ogdoadic Remnant. Nunu is really good and probably one of the best cards in the entire deck as a starter. But what it does is you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to send a dark reptile monster from your deck to the grave. And if you control no monsters or you control an Ogdoadic monster, then you can special summon this card from the grave, but banish it when it leaves the field, which basically sets up for some of your other Ogdoadic monsters to tribute this card to get it on your side of the field faster, to get any of them on your side of the field even quicker. So that's pretty much it for your Ogdoadic monsters. I'm then running a Lair of Darkness build in this particular build. And if you guys want to see an invoked version of this deck as well, you should definitely comment down below because I would totally love to do an invoked version of this deck as well. I might do it, but I want to hear from you guys as well. So we're going to be playing a single copy of Darkest Diabolos. I just play one. You can play two if you want to play two, but I find one to be fine in my build for Lair. And the deck is already really, really tight, and so I'm just playing one for this card. Basically, if a monster is tributed, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, which is really, really amazing to be able to just immediately special summon this card from the graveyard if it was there, or your hand if it wasn't. And that's such a good effect. We play 3 copies of Arima, which you can use the Arima to be able to discard it to add Lair from deck to hand, which is super, super helpful. And if it's on the field, you can tribute a monster or dark monster to draw a card. If you tribute a dark monster, other than this card to activate its effect, you can add a dark monster with 2,000 or more defense from your deck to your hand, which we have a couple of those targets in the deck, which is really nice. And then I play 3 copies of Lith, Lady of Lament, to round out the Lair engine. You really just need the 3 Liths because you can tribute a monster on the field, which can be your opponents if you have Lair of Darkness on the field. And the really cool thing is you can actually use the Light and the Dark Ogdoadic monster, the one that just tributes 1 for Lair of Darkness as well. You can use any of them with Lair of Darkness, but basically these are free special summons, which is pretty good. But then it also lets you basically search any trap that you need out of your deck, which is pretty good because it has the quick effect to tribute a dark monster, reveal 3 traps in your deck. Your opponent randomly picks one of them and you set it to your field. You shuffle the rest back into the deck, which is really good. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a couple of spells in the deck. We're mainly leaning towards the traps, but we are playing quite a few spells. So we're going to open up with a single copy of Monster Reborn, because Monster Reborn can be super helpful in this deck to get any of your Ogdoadic monsters back out of the graveyard. We play 3 copies of Lair of Darkness, which makes everything dark. And also all monsters become dark on the field. And then once per turn, if you would tribute a monster to activate your card effect, you tribute an opponent's monster. You can tribute an opponent's monster as if you controlled it. And then also, once per turn during the end phase, you special summon as many torment tokens that are 1,000 as possible to the turn player's field. So for example, if it's your turn and I've tributed 3 times, then you get 3 tokens. If it's my turn and I've tributed 3 times, I get tokens, and the effect is mandatory to give you the tokens if you do have the free zones. We then play 3 copies of Super Polymerization. You gotta play 3 Super Poly if you're playing Lair. Super Poly is just so broken of a card in any Lair deck that you have to play this as a 3 of. We're then playing 3 of Snake Rain because this card lets you discard a card to send 4 reptiles from your deck to the graveyard. If your opponent is playing Ash, they're going to Ash this. This card is so good to be able to just stack the grave with all your Ogdoadics and then just pop off. I kind of wish Infernoids had something like this, but it would make them tier 1 if they did. We then play 3 copies of the Ogdoadic Water Lily. Ogdoadic Water Lily lets you send a reptile from your deck to the graveyard, and then if you have 5 or more reptile monsters in your graveyard with different names, then you can special summon a reptile from your graveyard as well. If you open up Snake Rain and Ogdoadic Water Lily, you've basically gotten a free special summon and stack the graveyard for any card that you need. So opening up both of these is pretty pivotal and really helpful for this deck. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, I'm playing a single copy of Hollow. I like Hollow. I think it's really good because during the main phase, you contribute a reptile effect monster and then target 1 monster your opponent's graveyard and special summon it to your field, but send it to the graveyard during the end phase. And you only effect this card once per turn. And if this face-up card is sent from the spell and trap card zone of the graveyard, you send all face-up non-reptile monsters you control to the grave. It's really good at just interrupting your opponent and getting combo pieces that they need out of the graveyard to your field, which is why I play this card as a 1-of in my build. I'm then playing a single copy of Eradicator Epidemic. I had the secret rare. I figured I would throw it in the deck, and it's worked out really well for me. If you activate this and you tribute a monster that your opponent controls as 2,500 or more attack, when you have Lair on the field and you call spells, usually you're going to win the game. I just like to play it as a 1-of because I don't have as many targets in my deck as I would like to with this card. And so I'm liking it as a 1-of, as a tech card that I can surprise my opponent with. And you just basically activate this card and you call a spell or trap and check all spells on traps your opponent's side of the field and all cards in their hand until the end of the 3rd draw of your opponents during their draw phase. And you destroy all the chosen type. So I destroy all spells or traps, or either or, whichever one I pick. Usually I call spells depending on the deck that I'm playing against. We then play 3 copies of Full Force. Full Force is just really good because you get to tribute 1 dark monster with 2,000 or more defense, check your opponent's hand and all cards they currently control, and all cards they draw until the end of the 3rd draw after this card's activation, and destroy all monsters with 1500 or less defense, which is a lot of cards. This card is really, really good. It's a lot like Crush Card, and it's just so good in this deck. And then I'm playing 3 copies of Back to the Front because a lot of your Ogdoadic monsters can be brought back from the graveyard with Back to the Front, and it's searchable with your copy of your Lith, Lady of Lament. And so I'm playing this card as a 3 of in here because it's really easy to search and you're playing out of the graveyard all the time. And it makes it so you don't have to constantly be tributing monsters to activate your Ogdoadic monsters effects. So that's it for the traps and the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, I'm playing a single copy of Reptilian Echidna. Echidna is really good in this deck because basically she's a searcher and she also reduces the opponent's monster down to 0 attack for every it reduces one of your opponent's monsters' attack to 0, which is pretty good, because if this card is link summon you to target a face-up monster your opponent controls, changes attack to 0, and then during the main phase, you get to add a reptile from your deck to your hand for every monster your opponent currently controls that has 0 attack. But you can't special summon from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except reptiles, so it does kind of lock it in a little bit, but it's still a really good card. We then play a single copy of Predaplant Verte Anaconda because the Anaconda pops off. I don't play Dragoons, as you guys have seen, but you basically play this to get into your copy of your super polymerization really easily. You could drop this if you want to, but I still like playing it to get into super polymerization really fast. One copy of IP Masquerena. The Masquerena is really good because it's going to get you into a lot of plays like Unicorn and some other plays like Avermax as well. You play a single copy of Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame. This is basically here because it's a reptile link monster that's light that can help you out a lot to be able to go into different plays. You can get you quick effect, discard a card, place A counters on equal to the original level of monsters on the field, and distribute them as you wish of the monster that you discarded. And if this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon non-reptile link monsters with different names from your graveyard up to the number of monsters your opponent currently controls with A counters, which is really ridiculous. This card can be borderline Soul Charge. One copy of Phoenix because it can pop spells or traps. One copy of Unicorn because it can spin cards. One copy of Avermax because sometimes you want to summon this over access code because you'll use your copy of IP plus, say, a copy of Echidna, or your IP plus a copy of your plus a copy of your Predaplant Verte Anaconda to go into this, and it's really good when you put IP into this card. One copy of Access Code because Access Code just pops cards all over the place, and so this card is ridiculous in this deck. One copy of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, super poly target. One copy of the Predaplant that takes 3 darks. This card is really good in this deck. You can make it with a lot of different cards, and is really, really amazing. I play a single copy of King of the Feral Imps because you can make this card and search reptiles from the deck. I play one copy of the rank 4 Rika Queen. If this card is tributed, then you can bring it back to your side of the field and then overlay a copy of the Sacred Tree Beast on top of it, which is really, really good because it gets you additional negations. One copy of Raider's Knight because you're going to turn everything dark anyways with your copy of your lair, and you can make this card and then make Rebellion to then completely board wipe your opponent because you're going to Cold Wave the field with this card and then OTK your opponent because for every monster that's on the field, it gains attack equal to those monsters, which is really, really good to just gain a big, big dragon that's really easy to summon. The only downside of it is Raider's Knight does require dark monsters, but you play plenty of dark monsters in the main deck that are level 4 already. But if you lay down Lair of Darkness, you play even more dark level 4 monsters, so it's really easy to summon. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really fun deck to play around with. I highly recommend if you guys are trying to look for a new deck, especially a really cool deck, you should definitely play Ogdoadic. It plays very similar to the way, like I said, Infernoids plays, because it plays from the graveyard and tributing monsters on your side of the field to be able to special summon them out, where your copies of Infernoids would just banish them outright. So it makes me think a lot of the way that that deck plays. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.